So let's use this riverpod package in this project here. And this is the same project as before, as mentioned, where I installed this riverpod package. And in this lib folder here, I'll add a new providers folder where I want to set up these globally available provider objects. Now in there, I'll add a meals provider, and I'll name this file mealsprovider.dart to make it very clear that this file will contain such a provider. Now in this newly added mealsprovider.dart file, we should start by adding an import. And we should import from the Flutter riverpod package, and there the Flutter riverpod.dart file, so that this import is added. With that import added, we can add a provider by using this provider class that is provided by Flutter riverpod. Now instantiating this provider class will create such a provider object, which we then can listen to from inside our widgets. And we should therefore store this object in some variable so that we do store this object and we can access this object later. So for that, I'll add a new final variable called mealsprovider, and I'll name it mealsprovider because I plan on providing my meals data here. And later we're also going to add more complex providers, but we'll keep it simple here. And the provider class then actually takes a couple of parameters which you can set, but most importantly, it needs at least one parameter, one positional parameter, and that parameter actually is of type function. It's a function which will receive a so-called provider ref object. So a function that will receive an object automatically, because this function which we must pass to provider will be called by the Flutter riverpod package. And this function will receive such a ref, as mentioned, which is of type provider ref. And inside of this function, we now should return the value that we want to provide. And here, to keep things simple for now, I'll provide my dummy meals. For that, you must make sure that you also import dummy-data.dart. And of course, providing those meals is a bit redundant because the dummy meals is really just a list here, which we could import in other files anyways. And that is what we have been doing thus far. So we don't really need to use this provider approach here. We can just import it. The provider approach is more useful if we have dynamic data and cross-widget state. We will of course use that package for this more complex state later, but to get started, we'll provide the dummy meals even though it's technically not required. But with that here, we now set up a provider, and with that provider setup, we can now use it in widgets that need the data that is provided by this provider. So in this case, we can use this provider in widgets that need our meals. And in this application, that would, for example, be the tabs.dart file and there the tabs screen. Because in this tabs.dart file and there in the tabs screen state specifically, I'm using these dummy meals in the build method to derive my available meals based on the filters that were set. Now later we're going to outsource this logic into a provider as well, but for the moment I simply want to make sure that here I don't use the dummy meals that are imported from the dummy-data.dart file, but that we instead remove this import, and instead I use that provider which I just created.